Welcome to Rail Talk, episode 10. I'm so stoked that you're here. My name is Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And apologize for the little bit of a creepy lighting we got here. We're recording late in the afternoon / evening, but also I am co-host with a witch who is able to put very specific curses on certain people who play on certain football teams.
Oh, Joe, I'm sensing a little tension and bitterness. Is that possible? Is that Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable? And yes, I'm actually coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, where we're down here for the September sale. But more importantly, Joe, I actually want to give a shout out to Steph, Strad, Justify, Woo, Arrow, Poe, Ushpa, Burner. That's right. I met the one, the only, our 1A or one fan with, the best fan. I shouldn't say we only have one fan, but our number one fan, maybe co-fan with Skip. But
1A, like you said, 1A.
Yeah, 1 and 1A. Great entry, like Sham and Secretariat. But she came up to me, running up to me after we bought a horse and was like, oh my God. I'm doing a bad impersonation, but basically, oh my God, it's so great to see you. And I was like, oh, Steph, how are you? Nice to put a name to a face. And her very first question was, where's Joe? And I was like, oh, man. Yep. So hopefully that'll relieve some of your tension.
John, but you got to be used to being in public these days and people asking, where's Joe?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, come on.
Exactly.
I know Steph is not the first person to pose that question to you, my guy.
Yeah, no. And listen, I understand the rationale. I understand that, number one, people would rather talk to you than me. Respect there. But also, I think that people have the understanding or the false illusion of the fact that, like, you and I must always do things together. Like, you and I live together, right. You and I do the show together. And really, other than occasionally bumping into each other, kind of strangers in the night, and maybe doing a live show every now and then, you are far enough away in Brooklyn, and I am way the hell, in New Jersey, that our paths don't cross that often.
Till the Giants go 0-17, and you're sitting right here next to me recording a podcast, dog. Welcome to another episode. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel as we strive to keep bringing you consistent, honest, and transparent industry content. Where else are you getting that? Rail Talk is sponsored, as always, by Fasig-Tipton. Fasig-Tipton had a record-setting Saratoga Yearling Sale. The New York bred sale was pretty damn sweet as well. And they got a bunch of sales coming up between now and the rest of the year. First, the California Fall Yearlings and Horses of Racing Age Sale, which is September 26th in Pomona, California. Got a little inkling that West Point might be shopping that sale for a horse or two. And we got the Mid-Atlantic Fall Yearlings, which is coming up at Timonium. The sale date is October 2nd and 3rd. Then we got the Saratoga Fall Mixed Sale, which is October 17th, obviously, at Saratoga Springs. And then the big daddy of them all, the Fasig-Tipton November sale, which is November 7th, a couple days after the Breeders' Cup. Nominate now for that sale. I know John has done that already with their champion, and we're looking forward to her on the Night of the Stars. And don't forget, after that, we got the Mid-Atlantic December Mixed and Horses of Racing Age sale. That's December 5th. You can check out the catalogs for the California sale, the Mid-Atlantic Fall Yearlings, and the Saratoga Fall Mixed sale. And make sure to nominate now for Fasig November and the Fasig-Tipton December sale. All right, so we're in a little bit of a racing lull here, although today I was at the track at Aqueduct and West Point won a race with Don't Look Back at All. And we got a couple of horses coming up this weekend, especially we're looking forward to Carson's Run in the Grade 1 Summer Stakes on Saturday at Woodbine. That's a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup. But in general, sorry for the quick plugs, but in general, it's a little bit of a lull here for racing after Saratoga. Kentucky Downs is now closed, and then we'll start to ramp up again in late September, early October with like the final round of preps for the Breeders' Cup, which will be, as always, the first weekend in November at Santa Anita. But that doesn't mean there's no action, because this week at the Keeneland September sale, there was a lot of action, a lot of seven-figure horses, a lot of horses kind of going through the roof. And, we were obviously a big part of it at West Point. We took home the sale topper. I think is still a sale topper at this point, that Intimistive colt out of Nona Mia, who we're very, very excited about, for $3 million. But John's on the ground. He's one of the movers and shakers at the Keeneland September sale. So I defer to him on this. John, what is the mood on the ground in Lexington, especially compared to, we've had a tough summer in racing. There's been some tough moments, and, it seems like Keeneland, September, and just the yearling sales in general are their own worlds.
Yeah, they really are. And Joe, you bring up a good point about, the sales are kind of insulated from what's going on with the rest of the world. But that being said, it's kind of the status quo that we saw at the Fasig summer sales and how strong they were. And that's just carried over to this September sale down here. In talking to both, Boyd Browning at Fasig and Powers That Be at Keeneland, the thing that surprised me the most is that despite the overall economy, the country's economy and the worldwide economy, micro and macroeconomics, both sales companies hit all-time highs in number of credit requests and also in amount of credit. So basically, people are very excited about buying yearlings, and they're very excited about having an opportunity to project what these horses are going to look like, because every single horse that's been sold so far, there's been about 1,000 of them that have been sold over the past couple of days. Every single one of them, Joe, is undefeated. And every single person and group that bought those horses all think that they're going to win the Derby, the Oaks, the Belmont, the Ashland, the Breeders' Cup, and everything in between. And that's the excitement about owning young racehorses, is that the future is so far ahead of them. So people, the mood down here is of excitement. The mood down here is that people are like almost giddy with how excited they are about the future, and also about what those horses that have been newly purchased, what they're going to mean a year from now, 2 years from now for their respective owners.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that I think that what keeps people coming back, and I say this as someone now who's part of an organization that spends a lot of money at the top end of the auction and the sale market, but what keeps people coming back is horses like Archangelo. It was a $35,000 Keeneland September buy. I feel like Lady Eli originally was like a pretty cheap Keeneland September yearling, like $72,000 or something like that. I could be wrong about that, but you see it year after year in these horses in the second week of the September sale, and deeper in the Fasig-Tipton October sale, who pop up and win grade ones and grade twos. So that's not to say that I'm not excited about the class of high priced horses that we got at this sale, because it's just stop myself from swearing here. Staggering class of really well bred and beautiful colts in particular. And I get why people want to try to hit that home run, because that's the stallion. That's the dream, is to get a stallion prospect like West Point got with Flightline, and obviously there are other examples along the way, like Ron Winchell's had a bunch of great stallions along the way. Ahmed Zayat had an American Pharaoh who struck for him. And, the dream is to not only get like a great horse on the racetrack but a great stallion prospect. And like the Fasig sale and then the September sale are the two places to do that. So I get spending all the big money, but I do think that there's an allure in sticking around for like the later books in a sale, in a big sale, and then you can find those diamonds in the rough. And John, I'm sure that you guys will be paying attention to the second week of the sale as well.
Yeah, no doubt, Joe. Basically what we do as an organization is that we turn our focus from, pedigrees being more important than physical even, to, by the time this weekend comes around, you start getting to book 3, book 4, you start to change that, and you really start to focus on the athlete themselves. And then it's like, all right, the horse has this kind of conformation and projects to be this kind of an athlete. Can you live with the pedigree? Is really what it comes down to. Can you live with the female family? Is the stallion one that you're not going to hold your nose when you bid because you don't like that kind of line? But case in point, if you go look at the catalogs and you look at the cover, the front and back cover of the catalogs, Fasig, the September sale, what have you, you'll see not only the $1 million horses that won grade ones, but there's all, like you mentioned, there's all kinds of lesser known, less expensive horses that jump up and way outrun their pedigree or way outrun their physical limitations. And I'll give you an example that's close to me is Webslinger. Webslinger was a $50,000 purchase and was RNA'd at 3 other sales for under $50,000. So that's very attainable for a lot of people. It's very affordable. And you see that. You see that dream is almost like a lottery ticket. And it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire and you spend $1 million on a horse, or you're a couple people kind of patching together some money and buying a $20,000 horse. It's like that percentage of your wealth is going towards sports. And we're still an industry where, people love competition and they can't afford to buy the Yankees. They can't afford to buy the Jets. They can't afford to buy the Knicks. And this is their way to kind of be in sports and be involved and have that competitive juices flowing. And that's really what it's all about. And the way that, the way the tickets are, especially in our neck of the woods, to buy good seats for a Yankee game or 50-yard line seats for the Jets or Giants, you could basically use that money and buy a racehorse. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's almost that much, and it's almost worth that much of entertainment to the people that invest.
No, I mean that's what I live for, honestly. Like I being at West Point now in particular, being out to the races, and then we won a race, as I said earlier today, with Don't Look Back at All. She was a $150,000 2-year-old buy. She wasn't she's by Peace and Justice. She's not like a blue blood, like, $1 million horse, but she has given those partners so much enjoyment. Like she shows up every time, dirt, turf, sand, on the lead, off the lead, like, and you just never know until you put a saddle on them who they're going to be. And like I said, I'm so stoked for the class of yearlings that we picked up this week, but there's also a lot to be had in the middle market next week. And I'm excited for us to shop that. And your point is so well taken, John, that like for a lot of people, who maybe aren't millionaires or multimillionaires, but they're passionate about this sport. That's been my favorite thing about West Point so far. It's just being around that kind of unified passion. And especially when the horses run well, obviously that's great. But just like it really is like a lifestyle investment and a hobby investment that's unlike anything else in the world. Right,
exactly. And Joe, I know you're being modest because you guys had a horse that won the other day that was a $50,000 purchase. I can't remember the name of the horse, but
Independence Avenue. Yeah, she was a $50,000 OBS June buy. She won pretty easily at Colonial. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it is attainable. I mean, you can spend some money and buy an expensive horse, and theoretically you have a better chance to get a stake winner or a greatest stake winner. But in all reality, our industry shows that you can spend any amount and get a good horse. And there's a term that you always use that I can never pronounce: the meritocracy. Yeah. And explain to me what it means.
Yeah, no, so that's why I think people love racing and why we keep coming back to it is that's a meritocracy. You either can run or you can't. They put them on the racetrack. It doesn't matter what they cost. They either can run or they can't, or they're like this fast or that fast. Like there's nothing. You don't get a head start by a 16th of a mile because you cost a certain amount. They open the gates from the same position for every horse, and it's a meritocracy. Whoever's the fastest wins. That's one of the things I love about racing. One of the things that I think keeps us all coming back to it. Rail Talk is sponsored, as always, by the Green Group. If you're not using the Green Group to help you with taxes, you're probably, scratch that, definitely paying too much money in taxes. The Green Group has over 800 clients in the horse business. Len Green and the Green Group know the horse business because they're successful industry insiders. They are owners for more than 40 years, have owned some of the top horses in racing and breeding. It's been a big week for the Green Group this week at Keeneland in September. They bought a $1.1 million horse by Tappet out of Ladies Island. It was a super solid sprinter, I believe, in South Florida, and we're really excited for her. They've also sold a bunch of horses making $2 million. And we're so excited for them. And I think they bought, John, how many horses did you buy total?
This many, Joe.
John's going to start having to put his toes up, I think, before the sale is over because, Len and John and DJ Sable are always very active, and they should be because they're one of the most expert analyzers and analysts of horse flash and horse talent, especially Kim Valerio. Shout out to Kim. But going back to the Green Group for a second, Green Group knows two things better than most: the horse business and accounting. And Len will consult with you potentially for free. He's going to review your last returns. If you can't find more savings, he tell you you're doing great, but he usually will find you savings. Len's the man in terms of the horse business and the tax business. We love the Green family, and we're so excited for the success that they've had at Keeneland September so far. Can't wait to see those babies on the racetrack next year. This week on Rail Talk, we had a guest on that I've been dying to have on the show for a while. Jay Privman, the former national correspondent for the Daily Racing Form, one of the best racing scribes that we've been blessed to read for the last 30, 40 years. We talked about California racing, Bob Baffert, the upcoming Breeders' Cup, HISA. John did not join us on the interview because he was still busy buying horses, moving and shaking with the highfalutin class over at the September sale. So it was just me and Jay. We had a great conversation. Check it out. I'm so excited to bring this next guest on to Rail Talk. John's not here because he's too fancy buying billion-dollar horses. But I've been trying to have this guy on the show for a long time. He's the former national correspondent for the Daily Racing Form, one of the most well-respected racing journalists in the history of the sport. Jay Privman, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Joe. Thanks a lot for having me.
Oh, I'm so stoked to have you. So I got to ask you the most important question up front. Got to get this out of the way. How did you manage to retire on a racing journalist salary?
A little bit of embezzling and a couple of bank robberies.
Par for the course.
Yeah, and so I was good to go.
Oh, well, it's great. It's great to see one of us make it through to the other side, and we appreciate you, and you've been doing great work for a really long time, so you definitely deserve a really happy, healthy retirement and all of that stuff. But I just want to ask you first off about California racing, because you've seen California racing. That was your major beat for a long time, and you've seen it go through the ups and downs, the twists and turns, the catastrophe in 2019 to now a place where it seems like we're in a really good spot, at least from equine safety perspective. But just can you talk a little bit about California racing, where it is now in terms of the health of the racing industry? Is it, are you bullish about it? Are you, a little insecure about it? How do you feel?
Cautiously optimistic, I guess, would be a proper phrase for it. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in transition right now, even as you know, as recently as just within the last couple of months, the whole situation with Northern California racing now being in flux in terms of what's going to happen. I mean, obviously Golden Gate's going to go away, whether it's in December or next June, and what that's going to mean for a potential circuit up there or not, and where that simulcast money is going to go. I know that Stronach Group wants it to go towards purses at Santa Anita, and there'll be a pitched battle over that, I'm sure, at an upcoming California Horse Racing Board meeting, which fortunately I don't have to cover. And
those are the worst. Those board meetings, good Lord.
Steve Anderson's cross to bear for years, and he deserves combat.
Shout out to Steve.
But, to your initial point, Joe, from a safety standpoint, I think there's a lot of things that the sport can learn from what happened here. Unfortunately, California was kind of a canary in a coal mine with what went on at Santa Anita and even at during one summer at Del Mar. And you can make analogies from that to what went on this past summer, for instance, at Saratoga, or some of the things that have gone on industry-wide in Maryland or in Kentucky earlier this year. And I think a lot of the protocols that California's put in place are models that the rest of the industry should be adopting.
No, for sure. And just to drill down on that point, you covered this for a long time. It may not have been the safety emphasis, that back in the day, but you've seen the evolution of the technology that can help keep horses safe. What do you think in particular is working in California?
Well, the oversight of all the veterinary demands that need to be made, I think, are helping. And I think the trainers have also realized that they can't really play fast and loose. I don't think they really did, but I'm sure there were some that might have dropped a horse that now might have second thoughts about dropping a horse to just try and unload it. There's been, I think, a real emphasis on track maintenance that I don't know that there was, especially during that terrible winter at Santa Anita. I think in hindsight now, I think it's been pretty well established that that was a major contributing factor to the problems that went on there. And now California just doesn't race if a track needs to be sealed. It just doesn't happen anymore. So the days of sloppy sealed racetracks and then drying out tracks, that's over. That's just not going to happen anymore. So I think those kinds of things, the increased veterinary oversight, all of that together, I don't know that it's one thing. I think it's a number of things all coming together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a soup to nuts approach to get to where they've gotten to, and it's to be applauded and to be, I think, emulated across the country. Let's talk a little bit about Bob Baffert, just because he's the lightning rod out in California and racing in general. And he's obviously been a tremendously successful trainer, Hall of Fame trainer, trained Triple Crown winners, tons of Hall of Famers. But he also gotten himself into some little trouble in the last couple of years with the Medina Spirit DQ and a bunch of other drug positives and some kind of negative PR, I think, from the Bob Baffert camp and him in particular. You know, we saw the news recently that Churchill Downs is extending his ban. This was one of the cases where I did come to bat for him and say that there was really no reason to do that beyond spite. But, you know, you've been around Bob a ton and you've been around California racing a lot. You know, what's your impression of the Bob Baffert operation and kind of the roller coaster that he's been through and he's put racing through a lot through the last several years?
Well, I would push back slightly on he's put racing through a lot, because the one thing that I've just really found unfair is that I think he's been treated differently from others who have had similar situations. That's not to say that he shouldn't have been penalized for things that happened. That's not to say that there are penalties that shouldn't have happened for him. But I do think he has been treated differently. And I'll give you, a specific. You look back a year ago at how people have looked at the way the Forte Hopeful Stakes and then the subsequent mind control situation happened. And I remember back when, for instance, Baffert had the two situations in Arkansas with Charlatan and Gamine, there was a big clamor that, well, those horses shouldn't even be on the ballot for Eclipse Awards, and Baffert shouldn't be on the ballot for Eclipse Awards. And if you want to take that position, I'm fine with that. But if that's the position you're going to take for him, I think you need to take that position with others. Or don't take that position with him and don't take that position with others. That's the thing that I have found objectionable, is that I think, as you pointed out, he's been a lightning rod. A lot of people like to say he's, quote unquote, the face of the sport because of the success that he's had. And there's an expression, you don't want to be the tall poppy. And I think because he's been the tall poppy, there's been a little bit more pressure to bear on him than there might have been somebody who had similar situations that weren't as prominent a person. But that, again, I'm not trying to say that he shouldn't have been disqualified in some situations, and he shouldn't have had penalties. But I think that the penalties have exceeded the crimes at this point, and especially the one thing that you originally brought up, the Churchill Downs extension.
No, I mean, and I'm with you on that. I don't think that there's any grounds for Churchill Downs to extend that suspension. The only thing I would say is that he has had high-profile drug positives and high-profile breakdowns that other trainers have not necessarily had. I kind of feel both ways about it. Like, I feel like he has bent the rules in a way that a lot of guys, other guys haven't. But like you're saying, he has gotten a lot of scapegoating in terms of, his profile and he's kind of become the poster boy, I think, for a lot of people thinking about, what's wrong with the industry. But I want to transition a little bit to the potential fix for a lot of these things. And I think it was particularly a lot of ambiguity around drug rules and around disqualifications and equine safety. And that's the implementation of HISA. And there's a lot of people who feel a lot of different ways about the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. And I think, there's criticisms to be had of the way it was rolled out, but this is just the kind of business. It's never going to be easy to roll something like this out with 35 different jurisdictions. I'm just curious, from a journalist perspective, what's your impression of the early days of HISA?
So I'll take a slight step back from that. I think the overarching goal of HISA is a correct one, to have a level playing field nationwide and to not have trainers or bettors have to go by different rules in whatever jurisdiction they're either gambling at or racing in. So that part of HISA, I think, is something that is the correct thing to get to, and I hope we get to it. The rollout to me has been poor. There have been a lot of stops and starts. There have been a lot of things that I think have been implemented that were unfortunate. One of the things you and I were just discussing a moment ago, California safety. California has a 14-day stand down on even training a horse and 30-day stand down on racing a horse after an interarticular injection. HISA's rules are less than that. And that to me was a mistake from the start. We know what
I just got to push back on that real quick. Just because HISA is now talking about adjusting and being able to do a 30-day rule. And whether or not you think the original rule was correct, isn't the fact that they're able to pivot and potentially change the rule to, be more effective a good thing? Because what kind of process will we have had to go through to change that rule in the past system,
No, I'm glad that they're changing the rules. They've made some changes already of things that were not done correctly. The point I was making is that I think, as I said, I think the initial rollout was poor because I think a lot of things were not done as smart as they could have been. And yes, it's good that they're recognizing that and not digging their feet in the sand, but I'll stand by my original point. I think the rollout was poor because I don't think there were some best practices that were known that were not implemented from the get-go.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. It's been a bumpy rollout, but my main point is that I like that they're able to be nimble, because that's something that racing has not had, the ability to adjust and change rules and quickly, be flexible on things that may or may not work. So I think that in itself is a victory. But I wanted to ask about Saratoga, because this was obviously an extremely devastating summer for Saratoga and all the, the horses breaking down. It wasn't just Maple Leaf Mel and New York Thunder. Those were the two that caught the most eyes. There were a lot of horses that broke down at Saratoga. I mean, someone who's coming from California has seen the successes there. Is this just a thing where there was an unfortunate cluster of breakdowns, or was there something with the track? Like what, from an outsider's perspective now, just being a fan of racing mostly, what was your reaction to what we saw at Saratoga? Yeah,
it was heartbreaking, because I remember when this happened during the summer at Del Mar like 6 or 7 years ago, and it's hard on everybody. You get to the point where you don't even want to go back to the track the next day because you're just so deflated when you leave after an incident like that. And you don't watch races with enjoyment. You're almost watching them with a hand over your face and looking through, with your fingers covering your eyes, not enjoying the spectacle, but just sort of hoping nothing terrible happens. And that's no way to really enjoy what we really enjoy. So it was heartbreaking from afar, to watch what was going on there. It's been my experience, having done this for as long as I did, that usually when these things happen, they happen in clusters for reasons that a lot of times are not really known. And then you'll go months without having anything terrible happen. And then from an average standpoint, it's kind of what you would expect from a safety standpoint, but all of it happened in a short amount of time. And that was what happened at Del Mar several years ago, and we'll see if that's what happens on the New York circuit. There was one specific incident that happened there, though, that I know in the aftermath of what's gone on at Saratoga, there's been more talk about synthetic surfaces and things like that. But when you look at the details on what went on with New York Thunder, it's hard to say that that's an incident that could have been prevented by just having a synthetic surface. There were things that were missed there that should not have been missed, that were inexcusably missed, and that led to the unfortunate demise of that horse. And those are things that need to be made better before we talk about all the other things that need to be made better about the sport.
Let me just follow up on that real quick because, I talked about this last week on the show about how New York Thunder in his PPs had a red blinking light that said unsound, but I just want to follow up on that. And what are you specifically talking about that should have been noticed and intervened upon?
Well, there was a story in the New York Times that just sort of detailed all of the interarticular injections that he had and all the being on the vets list and things of that nature. And it just makes you wonder just how sound he was. Now, obviously he's got to pass a vet check in the morning. So he was good to go from that standpoint. And every horse, as we know, every horse that's entered to run gets looked at thoroughly. But there were definitely some red flags with that specific horse based on his history that make you wonder if it was just an act of God or something more.
So then I think the question becomes, like, what do you do with horses like that? Jay, you and I have seen, you more than me, but we've both seen a lot of horses that are brilliantly fast and just not sound and need all sorts of maintenance along the way just to get them to the racetrack. Like, do we stop horses like that from running? Because, you could say the counter argument is, you could say New York Thunder went out, ran 4 times, blew out his competition, came back sound and fine. But obviously he needed all of this help along the way. Like, what would you do? Like, if you were the veterinarian in that case, like, he's obviously run 4 times already and been okay. How do you step in and say, no, this horse can't run anymore?
Right. So I don't know that any of us could have said on that day he can't run based on the rules that were in place at the time. But as we were just talking about with the interarticular injections, the rules that were in place on the day that he ran are going to be different from what they're going to be now going forward under HISA. So that's one specific area where, to your question of how can we prevent horses that are potentially in jeopardy, maybe by having them be under these new rules of 14-day stand downs to even train and 30-day stand downs to even work after an interarticular injection, you're not going to have the potential of a horse like that coming back maybe sooner than they should.
No, for sure. And I think erring on the side of caution is so prudent in these cases. Like, I'll give you an example. So I work for West Point now, and we had a horse named Gallon of Rush who was going to run in $1 million race on Saturday at Kentucky Downs, the Philly Turf Sprint. I don't know. All those races sound the same to me. They're all $1 million. But anyway, it was one of those $1 million races, and we shipped her down there from New York, and she was in good form, and she definitely could have won, and they scratched her at the gate. And even though our Rat Ortiz said she feels fine, she feels great, the vet said we can't run. We thought she warmed up a little off. Philly's sound and fine. So we think that they made a mistake. But nevertheless, you got to walk the walk in addition to talking the talk. And even if we think that the vets are making mistakes from time to time when they do these vet scratches or gate scratches, you got to deal with it. You absolutely have to deal with it because it's what's best for the horses at large. And I think that's the thing that, like you said, that's been successful in Del Mar is the intervention of the veterinarians. Let's get off all that and talk about some racing, because we've been talking about Jay's like, oh, thank God, this isn't going to be a bummer the whole time.
Reminding me of why I retired.
yeah, you're welcome. But no, so I remember, just to bring the past point up for a second, I remember I was at the Santa Anita Breeders' Cup in 2019, and that was obviously a terrible year for Santa Anita. And I remember it was fun, but I was in the press box counting the horses as they crossed the wire to make sure we didn't have any kind of disaster. Now, California is in such a better position. I think that the uproar has died down because we've done the right thing, specifically out in California. The 2023 Breeders' Cup is back at Santa Anita this year. I assume Jay's going to be there every single day. Just what are some of the things you're looking forward to most? What are some of the horses you're looking forward to seeing? Give me your little primer on Breeders' Cup so far.
Yeah, I'm obviously looking forward to the Classic, and especially this year because it just really looks like the 3-year-olds are going to play a much more prominent role in that race than they usually do. I mean, you do get 3-year-olds that are top quality horses in that race on occasion. You go back to Arrogate and beating California Chrome, for instance. But this year, it's not impossible that the top 3-4 choices in the race are going to be the 3-year-olds, and that has not happened before, and that's exciting, especially fingers crossed if some of these stay in training for 2024 and don't go to the breeding shed right away. So that's always what I'm most looking forward to. And then to get a horse like Augusta Rodin to hopefully come over for the turf would certainly be exciting. I love when you get the horses of Aidan O'Brien and Gosden coming over and you get that mix of those European horses to run in the grass races. That's always exciting. And there's always the potential, I think, especially this year, to get some Japanese runners to come. They had great success at Del Mar a couple of years ago, and it's the easiest ship possible for horses from there. And as we know, the Japanese horses are now competing as well as anyone on the world stage.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I love that because it's supposed to be a worldwide event. For a lot of years, it's just the U.S. and Europe. But when you get those horses to ship in from all around the world and make a dent, like that's what it's supposed to be about. So tell me this, like, you're a retired journalist now. You obviously put in your years, and you did it, like I said, better than anybody else, especially on the West Coast. But as someone who does not have to cover the sport now, how much are you paying attention to it voluntarily? How much have you picked up other things that you do with your time that used to be working for the DRF? What's the split these days in terms of racing and the rest of your life? So
I'm still following it, pretty closely, but certainly not at the granular level that I did when I was working. I don't live very far from Del Mar, so I was going out there a couple times a week while the meet was going on. I actually was back on the East Coast and was at Saratoga for the closing weekend of the racing there. And I really followed those two meets, pretty closely, but I'm not handicapping on a regular basis like I used to. I'm certainly not following the 3-year-olds in the spring or the 2-year-olds now in the fall as closely as I once did. But I'm still, it's not like I've divorced myself from it either. And I'm still occasionally co-hosting a radio show out here with my friends John Lindo and Bob Ike and doing things like that. So I still have my finger in it, but not my whole hand like I used to. I'm a huge hockey fan, and so looking forward to hockey season starting. I have a partial season seat package with some friends with the Kings. They're my team, even though I've now live an hour and a half away from where they play, but that's who I grew up being a fan of, and that's still like the one sport team that I'm a passionate fan of out of all the other sports.
Let me tell you why I didn't like Jay Privman before I got to talk to him and know him, because I'm a diehard New York Rangers fan, and I felt like Jay would retweet that picture of the 2014 double overtime win that we could probably put it up right now with Henrik Lundqvist splayed out on the ice after giving up the double OT winner. That's like one of the most painful sports moments in my life. But were you at that game? Like, where were you that night when they won?
5 rows behind that net.
Jesus. Okay. Yeah. And I will maintain that was the closest 5-game series in the history of hockey. Because if you remember, the Rangers had leads in games 1 and game 2. They both went to overtime. And I remember watching game 2 and they lost that game in overtime. And I couldn't help thinking in the back of my head, this series is over. Like, you got to win one of those 2 games.
I watched game 2 in the bowels of Belmont Park after that year's Belmont Stakes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I always love about the Stanley Cup final is it's always kind of aligned with the, oh man, that was painful. But I think the Kings are on the come up now. You had a couple of lean years. How do you feel about the team?
They've improved in a lot of areas, but not in goaltending. So, unless they plan on winning 8-6 every night, I'm a little concerned about their goaltending situation. When Cam Talbot and Phoenix Copley are your 2 goalies going into the season, it's 2 nice backups to have. But
you're talking about New York Rangers legend Cam Talbot. You're talking about New York Rangers legend Cam Talbot, who stepped in when Hank had that little blood vessel thing in his neck. Right. Cam stepped in, and he was he was money that year. But yeah, I have the opposite problem. I'm super confident in the goaltender. No confidence in anybody else after the way we flamed out last year. But at least nobody tore their Achilles yet. Anyway,
There you go.
this is the tragedy of New York sports. Jay, thank you so much for coming on, my man. I tried to get you on the previous shows, and we were supposed to get on, and there was just too many complications, mostly on my end. You are the best, and we miss you and your coverage, but I'm so glad, like I said, that you made it to the other side and you're enjoying racing as a fan. Jay, thanks so much for coming on, brother.
Well, the embezzling came in handy over the years, so yeah. So that would be my advice to you if you want to try and get out as early as I did.
All right, I'll take that under consideration and advisement. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Joe.
So that was a great conversation with Jay Privman. Been dying to have Jay on the show for a long time. He's obviously an expert in California racing in particular, but he's also an expert in racing in general. And I feel like it's opened him up in his retirement to be able to speak his mind. He's a very, very valuable voice in racing that we're going to hope to have on the show in the near future. But in the meantime, Rail Talk is brought to you by TaylorMade Sales. TaylorMade is the worldwide leader in thoroughbred sales, marketing, and horse care. They sold over $16 million worth of horses at the first week during the first week of the Keeneland September sale. They're family owned and operated since 1976. And I believe Jon is wearing some swag from TaylorMade right now. So you must have something to say about TaylorMade and their presence at the September sale.
Well, they are so attentive to detail, Joe, that they noticed that when I was out in the rain, I didn't have a jacket. And the very next day, they presented me with this. It's unbelievable. This is their medallion racing arm. And it's a really soft, it's like a very nice, soft.
If you give a little galoshes too, Johnny boy,
they do. I'm sure they have little booties that I haven't seen yet. But Joe, something else that's aside from attentive to detail that all the Taylor boys have. There's something that I've never talked to the audience about, primarily because it was kind of like a trade secret, and I'm going to let you in on it. Okay, but TaylorMade, if you have a horse that you're selling with TaylorMade, they give you a login to something called their Frontman dashboard. And basically what it shows is there's a picture and walking video of your horse. It shows you the pedigree, the vet reports, the statistics for that family. So if you have, like we were selling a Medaglia d'Oro colt, on the statistics, it showed all of the Medaglia colts that have been sold over the past 2 years, the proper selling points for our particular one, total inspections, repository hits, scopes, scans, vetting, et cetera, et cetera. And basically why they do that is it gives you all the information you need to be able to put together a comprehensive idea of what you think you should sell the horse for. And that's one of the main reasons why TaylorMade has such a good strike rate, because you have all the data at your fingertips, literally at your fingertips, to try to handicap and figure out how you should put a reserve on your horse, what you should sell it for. And more times than not, you're selling it for more money than what you anticipate. So, I love the dashboard. I use it all the time when we're selling horses. It shows me how popular our horse is compared to the rest of the consignment. It shows me specifically not only who looks at the horse, but how many horses they looked at overall. So if it's a 1-horse show, that guy really likes it. If it's a 9-horse show, maybe that individual is just shortlisting for somebody. But it gives you so much information that you're not just kind of, making a random idea of how much you think you should sell the horse for. And information is power, and TaylorMade provides their clients with that wattage.
One more topic we wanted to address before we get out of here, and this relates to claiming rules, which is like kind of a hot button topic and varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I'm going to defer to Jon on this because Jon's got the breaking news as if he were a journalist himself. Churchill has some new claiming rules. Jon, can you explain them and just kind of give a quick reaction?
Yeah, Joe, the nice thing about it is, like, being down here in Kentucky, we got on the cutting edge to find out when Churchill Downs announced these new house claiming rules. So this is only the house rules if you have horses at Churchill Downs, if you want to claim horses at Churchill Downs. So they announced it today. The new established rules are as follows. Basically, Joe, you have to, as a trainer, in order to be eligible, you had to have started a horse in Kentucky from July 7th, or since July 7th, which ironically enough was the start of the Ellis Park meet. The second thing is a claimed horse may not race outside of Kentucky for 60 days following the date of the end of that meet during which the horse was claimed, or January 1st, whichever is the first one to occur. And thirdly, you have to fill out paperwork in order to be a representative to claim a horse. You have to have a claiming agreement on file before you're eligible, and it has to be approved before you're eligible to claim a horse. So, Joe, why are they doing this? Well, the past couple of years, there have been trainers from all over the country that have basically come into Kentucky and pillaged, the race meets, whether it's Churchill Downs or Keeneland or even Turfway, and have pulled
Delmar
or
Delmar. Delmar
like,
shipping it. They did the ship and win thing out of Delmar that people have been taking advantage of.
Where you get extra money for shipping in. Exactly. So a lot of these trainers are taking advantage of it and claiming horses and moving them out of town, which, basically if you're running a meet in Kentucky, you're screwed because these horses are leaving and never coming back. So they implemented these new rules effective today, which is, the first opening night was this evening. And they announced it like at noon. So my understanding is there were a few trainers in New York, at least that I know, that wired money down, expecting to be able to claim horses tonight and licking their chops to be able to get some of these, these good new horses out of Kentucky. And they were denied by the racing office in Churchill. So they allowed them to wire the money in, but they're not allowed to claim unless they fulfill all three of these requirements.
That's wild. And I think there's two questions come to mind for me, at least, off of the jump. The one first is through interstate commerce laws, can you really ban somebody from claiming a horse and moving them out of state? I don't, obviously I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the logistics of that, because that's a pretty bold step to take. And that's not how racing has worked for a really long time. There's been constant interstate movement of horses. So, I would love to hear from a lawyer about how enforceable that particular rule is, that you can't move the horse out before 60 days after the meet, after the current meet is over.
After the meet is over. Yeah, so it's not even like a 30-day jail period where, after 30 days you could move the horse. It's 60 days after the meet ends.
That's nuts. And I wonder how enforceable that is. The other question is that, do we think that this is going to prompt some retaliation from some other states like New York or Florida or whoever? Because I don't know, to me, this is a pretty bold step, because I agree with you that it doesn't happen as frequently, but sure, there are horses that get claimed out of New York, especially during the Saratoga meet, and then head to Kentucky in the Midwest and never get seen from again in the New York area. So John, I don't know. What do you think? This seems like a pretty big salvo to be our horse population is our horse population. Don't touch it. Don't mess with it. Don't subtract from it. I wonder if this is going to, reach that level where it becomes kind of an interstate war.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. I think there's no doubt about it, because one thing about this industry is that it is a copycat industry. So if one jurisdiction implements a rule, all of a sudden there's a domino effect, and the other states go, that's actually a pretty good rule, and they were allowed to do it. So I'm sure we're allowed to do it also. It's not surprising. It wouldn't surprise me, I should say, if other states implement similar situations. Again, going back to my age-old discussion and argument about there's just too many racetracks out there right now. There's too many racing jurisdictions. There's not enough horses. And that's why you're getting these kind of archaic rules of not being able to ship horses out when you claim. Actually, I should take that back. You can ship a horse out. You just can't run them anywhere. So it's basically a restriction of trade, in essence, because you have an asset that you can't utilize.
Yeah, no, that's wild to me. And I just wonder what the specific impetus was, whether there was a breaking point at some point. But yeah, I worry that this becomes now a turf war, where New York is going to do the same thing, where, we don't have a great horse population in the winter. We will probably once we get a synthetic track, but we don't have that right now. And, we can't sacrifice any horses at Aqueduct if somebody wants to come in and claim. We'll see.
Right. But who the hell wants to claim horses at Aqueduct?
Listen, the big A is still standing. proud, and strong. And it was a beautiful day out at that Big Blue disgrace today. Don't worry.
Joe, what do you call this meet? Do you call it the Belmont at Aqueduct meet? Do you call it
I just call it Aqueduct. You can call it Bacqueduct, which a lot of people are calling
Aqueduct,
it.
I think is cool.
Bacqueduct.
BAQ.
Yeah.
That's
super cool. Yeah. Badass. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Rail Talk. If you like this episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to be the first to know when new episodes drop. You'll find weekly podcast episodes, blooper reels, one-on-one interviews in our Breakaway Rail Talk series. Be sure to leave us a like and a comment below. We love talking to y'all, and who knows, you might just end up on the show one day. That's it for episode 10 of Rail Talk. We had so much fun. I had a great time talking to Jay Privman. Shout out to Jay for coming on the show. Thank you to Jon for piping in from Keeneland, September, making a lot of noise over there, both on the buying and the selling end. Wish you guys the best of luck the rest of the sale. Thank you as always to our producer Patty Wolf, our associate producers Anthony Aaliyah LaRocca, and Nathan Wilkinson, and especially our sponsors Fasig-Tipton, the Green Group, and TaylorMade. Appreciate all y'all for watching. We had a good time. We'll do it again next week.